As Unitarian Universalists, we believe truth is larger than any one book or way. Religion and science go hand in hand. Integrity requires freedom of conscience. Diversity is something to celebrate. In the struggle for justice, we come alive. Our highest aspiration and calling is love. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever path you are on, you are welcome here.
Good morning. As many of you know, the Reverend Dr. Midge Squire passed away recently. She served as West Shore's Minister of Religious Education from about 1980 to 2002. And I have been thinking a lot about Midge recently and her legacy here at West Shore. Many things have changed over the years: curriculum, technology, even our church building, to name a few. But there are so many things that are and always will be the same. A child's sense of wonder, their questions about the death of a pet or the birth of a new baby, their need to experience the sacred with a quiet moment and the lighting of a candle, their search for a welcoming, loving community. Midge helped to equip her Sunday school teachers, myself included back then, to provide a space for children to explore and to experience all of these things. And that legacy lives on. Today, we recognize the amazing adults who light a candle each Sunday with our children. These are the people who help them wrestle with those big life questions. Our teachers provide a space where children are accepted just as they are, with all of their energy and their quirkiness and their feelings and their big ideas. It takes 20 teachers, 5 members of the Religious Education Committee, 4 trained Our Whole Lives facilitators, 2 childcare providers, 1 youth ministry coordinator, 1 junior choir director, 1 programs assistant, and 1 director of religious education to make our programs for children and youth possible. If you were any of these things this year, teacher, committee member, staff, will you please rise as willing and able? This year you have been patient and flexible. You have shown up each week and been a steady, caring presence to our kids. You have touched their hearts in ways that they will probably never know, and you will never know. And from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of our children, our families, and our congregation, thank you, thank you, thank you. I have a small gift for each of you, a chalice, and when you light it, I hope it will remind you of the light that you brought to teaching this year. There will also be cake and coffee hour to celebrate. Let's give them all a big round of applause. We light our chalice today in recognition of our teachers. Thank you.
By now, you've noticed I'm not Reverend Anthony. Unfortunately, he tested positive for COVID earlier this week. He's going through the regular cold and flu symptoms and working on recovering. He's quarantining this week to make sure he doesn't spread it to any of us. And he is watching on live stream if you want to wave at him and wish him well. I want you to know that almost everything that I'm saying to you today are Reverend Anthony's words, Reverend Anthony's message. I'm just delivering them to you in a different package. And now, back to Reverend Anthony's words. Once again, welcome to everyone here and to the folks joining us virtually. It was writer E.B. White who once said, "I arise in the morning torn between a desire to improve or save the world and a desire to enjoy or savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day." Whichever desire you are feeling more this morning, or maybe you are feeling both equally, you're in the right place. We have so much that's good going on. Thank you to all of the volunteers who made EarthFest such a wonderful success yesterday. And check out the West Shore Weekly in your order of service about events coming up and how you can get involved. One thing I want to lift up is Dave Blazer's Golden Anniversary Concert later this afternoon at 4 p.m. here in the sanctuary. Dave is celebrating his 50th anniversary as a professional musician. And this concert is going to be joyous and amazing. Come be a part of it. Let's now greet each other warmly. While we're doing this, children and youth are dismissed to their classes, and if you see someone you haven't met before, say hello and maybe offer a wave to the folks joining us from home. Last week in worship, Reverend McCarr spoke about the good things happening here and how he made his annual financial pledge with the hope that it would create even more good things next year. That's what our financial gifts are about, after all. He then asked you to share some of your stories. You wrote them down on 3x5 note cards. Here's what some of you shared. Making friends was a big theme, and I quote, "Connecting over coffee in Baker Hall. It's hard to meet people as an adult." Since joining in 2015, the meeting and making of many new friends has enriched my life. I traveled with a group of women from West Shore to Europe and South America. Another big theme was the loving community. I've been watching services online so long that I'd forgotten the great welcome you get when you walk in the door and show up in person. Thank you, West Shore. Seeing the openness and consideration with which new folks and people are accepted and included here constantly inspires me to do better with this in my own life. A third big theme was about how people's families are supported. My daughter has made friends whose values align with our family. She can be herself fully with these friends, and no matter where we move after my divorce is finalized, she will have this stable group every Sunday where she feels belonging. Yet another theme, justice work, is highly valued. When my wife and I began visiting in 2014-2015, we were at a service when it was announced that our marriage equality sign had been stolen. Right then and there, the congregation raised funds to replace it, and this was our first donation ever to the church. As it turned out, the sign maker replaced the sign free of charge. Meeting wonderful, loving, conscientious people, helping to make the world a better place for everyone. And music is a passion for many. Music singing in choir, concerts, silent films, and the love and inclusivity which is music. Our worship services are working. I often feel a sense of peace during our services. Being introduced to Braiding Sweetgrass, love that book. West Shore gets me thinking. I have been awed by realizations from sermons, thank you. And people are growing spiritually. It has taken me a long time to feel comfortable with my own personal beliefs about God, Jesus, and religion in general. This church has helped me on my journey to feel comfortable and confident about what I believe without judgment. Support in hard times was yet another theme. I felt supported by the fellowship of the church as I went through the worst year of my life, last year, when I lost my significant other of many years. Caring for me after my surgery with meals, cards, and sitting with me. The love and support I've felt since my husband died. And folks are coming back. I have been gone for a long time. I am grateful you are still here. Having returned after 10 to 15 years away, I find it a place for happiness. And lives have literally been saved here. My wife got her blood pressure taken here. That saved her life and the life of our unborn son. 85 of you shared stories. I wish we had time to tell them all, but from this brief sampling, I hope you can see that West Shore is a source of so many good things, and our financial gifts make it possible. Please consider making an annual pledge if you've never done so before. And if you have done so before, consider a pledge for next year that would make you feel proud of how you are doing your part to create more good things for next year. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Good morning, West Shore. I'm Brian Gardner, and I am the worship associate for today. Over the past several years, we've all heard a phrase, justice-heartedness, threaded throughout multiple sermons and themes. And as I've thought in recent days about just a snapshot of events that have happened recently, events where children have been shot for ringing the wrong doorbell, or accidentally getting into the wrong vehicle, or rolling a ball into the neighbor's yard, I see how deeply needed justice-heartedness is needed in this world. Because it seems as though rather than developing and deepening compassion, it can be all too easy to give in to fears and anxieties, often amplified by ideologically driven media. And out of those fears and anxieties, perhaps it becomes too easy for some to view other human beings as enemies. And we combine that with ongoing loosening of firearm laws and regulations, and these sorts of unjust tragedies increase. Something that I am forever grateful to have learned as a result of joining West Shore is the importance of seeking out voices and perspectives outside of my own experiences, to listen with the intent of understanding and expanding the circle of my capacity for compassion. And as part of that, recently, I read about how common it is for violent metaphors to be found in everyday speech, and that such phrases can contribute to the ongoing desensitization and normalization of violence. And so as a quick story, I was on a work call about 2 weeks ago, and I realized I was just about to say the phrase, "We got to show up with guns fully loaded." Has anyone ever said something like that or been present in a meeting? You know, you're not talking about going to battle, but there's the battle metaphor. But right as I was about to say that, my brain, it went bing. Occasionally my brain is a machine that goes bing. And it went, do you remember what you just learned? Do you really want to express yourself this way? All you're doing is preparing for a meeting. And oh, by the way, you've got about 0.2 seconds to figure something else out. So it felt a little bit like doing improv, you know, where you're talking but thinking at the same time. And so I blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. I said, we need to make sure we show up to the picnic with enough sandwiches for everyone. And it got a laugh out of my coworker. And also importantly, it still conveyed exactly what I had hoped to express. And then later on, as I thought more about what that moment was and what that felt like, I realized that I think there was another dimension to that as well. Because aside from the overt violence of the original phrase I was thinking of, there was also the unspoken message about how I view the relationship between myself and our client. Do I really want to view this relationship as though it were combat? Now, picnic, on the other hand, that's a pretty awesome way to get together with someone, to show up with sandwiches to share with friends, rather than bullets to fire at an enemy. And it was really surprising to me to think of how much can be conveyed and oftentimes felt, even if subconsciously, by the metaphors that we use. And so this whole process for me of learning, trying something new, and thinking about how it went, this felt really good. And to me, that's part of the result of striving to be justice-hearted. And of course, I do have to recognize that it's a very small story, Because when we contrast it to so many larger societal and systemic problems, it in fact feels painfully small and microscopic. When we think of these larger problems that cause harm today, alongside current efforts in legislatures and moral panics that are seeking to actively increase systemic harm. And it is these larger issues that speak to not only the need of justice-heartedness in the individual, but a need for collective action that is intentional and focused. And I am so grateful to belong to a church with a deep history of justice work, where justice is woven into the heart and soul of this community. I am also grateful to know that a dedicated task force spent tremendous time and effort engaging this congregation, and from that engagement, they developed a vision and a roadmap that, if affirmed by us, can help us to combine our hearts and efforts in ways that can satisfy that spiritual yearning to grow and to do good, and also to use the strength of our combined presence, along with deepened relationships in the community, so that we can engage both here and beyond these walls, and we can show up with as many sandwiches as we can to the picnic.
You are now welcome to come and share your heart. These are the joys and sorrows of our hearts, which Reverend Anthony will take into his meditations this week and pray for all that is our lives. As a reminder, these are Reverend Anthony's words. The peace of love in our time, a strategic justice vision for West Shore. Today, I aim to explore with you a proposed strategic vision for our justice work here at West Shore. It's a new story for us. I want to tell you where it came from, what it's for, and where it would take us should the congregation vote to approve it at the upcoming annual meeting in May. But before I go there, we need to know it's a new story that has old roots. The oldest root for us as Unitarian Universalists is our direct parent in Christianity. 2,000 years ago, Christianity was in a struggle with the peace of Rome, which essentially was a rigid status quo situation in which the Roman emperor was at the very top of the social pyramid. Wealthy men were right below. Only these folks had inherent worth and dignity. Everyone else was a tool to be used, controlled, subjugated, humiliated. There was no compassion for the people at the bottom, who were women and poor men and children and slaves and the conquered. This was the way of Rome, the way to a peaceful and unified empire. If you tried to fight Rome on this, even to avow religious faith in gods whose values contradicted Rome's, war would have been declared on you. Christians being torn apart by lions in the Colosseum is but one example of this. But this is how our living Unitarian Universalist tradition began. A rabbi by the name of Jesus dared to teach the Beatitudes. He dared to observe the table fellowship ritual. He dared to preach and teach and practice values which were directly opposed to the peace of Rome. He was judged treasonous, and he was crucified. Pontius Pilate thought that that would have been enough to crush the spiritual rebels who rallied around Jesus, but it was not to be so. The love of Rabbi Jesus was too powerful to die. Rabbi Jesus died, but his spirit was resurrected in the lives of his followers who refused the status quo peace of Rome. It's not that they did not believe in peace. They did, but they believed in a very different kind of peace. A peace that is not so much about the absence of struggle as the presence of love stirring in our midst, calling us to acts of compassion and justice. Sometimes this sort of peace is disruptive, and needfully so. When the status quo cruelty benefits some at the expense of others. Cruelty was what the peace of Rome was egregiously guilty of. The followers of Jesus, undaunted by continuing persecution, never let go of their vision of a peace that is the presence of love, calling for justice. This peace gathered them into communities. This means they acted not as separate agents, isolated and cut off from one another. No, they acted strategically. They organized. Justin Martyr, one of those early Christians who lived around 70 years after Jesus' death, said, "We, who formerly valued above all things the acquisition of wealth and possession, now bring what we have into common stock and communicate to everyone in need. We who hated and destroyed one another, and on account of their different manners would not live with men of a different tribe, now, since the coming of Christ, live familiarly with them and pray for our enemies. That's what the Jesus followers did. They moved from individualism to collective action. They figured out how to leverage differences in background and temperament and ability to make them serve a common vision of love. That's what they did. That's how they survived impossible odds, and thrived. Let me tell one more old story before I turn to the new. This old story is more recent. It's from 1946, which was the year of this congregation's first worship service ever. The Reverend Wayne Shuddy, our very first minister, was preaching, and he spoke from a temporary pulpit that right after the service would need to be broken down and carted off to storage space, together with 200 chairs that earlier that morning had been set up temporarily in the Masonic Temple in Lakewood, together with all the hymnals and all the other necessary parts and pieces. Reverend Shuddy's sermon was entitled, "Today's Need and Our Answer." It was but an updated vision of the peace of love, updated so that it might speak directly to the sensibilities of people in post-war 20th century America. What needed disrupting was the continued peace of Rome-like system of haves and have-nots. What called for justice was all of the devastation from war, the horrors of racism turned against Jews, with 6 million of them murdered in concentration camps. All the evidences of racism closer to home, like redlining and black exclusion from the GI Bill, and then the revelation of the atom bomb, and how innovation in human technology was swiftly outpacing people's ethical and spiritual capacity to use technology constructively and not destructively. All of this and more cried out for an updated and relatable vision of the peace of love. Reverend Shuddy preached that vision during that very first service, and it continued to compel people to keep coming back to church again and again and again, even though in those early years, everything needed to be set up every Sunday. The pulpit, the 200 chairs, all the hymnals, all the other parts and pieces. Even despite the inconvenience of that, people kept coming back. There are, said the Reverend Shuddy, 4 great needs of every human soul. 1, a feeling of security. This, he says, can come only by facing up to life, understanding the nature of the world as science shows it to us, and working with rather than against these fundamental laws of life. 2, a sense of significance. Each of us needs to realize how important he is to the fulfillment of the human venture whose goal is a good society. 3, development of sensitivity to the needs, desires, and worth of others. Only by such development can we hope for a world of peace and plenty for all. And 4, the need to add another dimension to life, the possibility of things that may be, that must be, if life is to reach its highest fulfillment. That was the beginning of the peace of love vision for us. People organized around it. A new congregation's wings were lifted by it. 77 years later, we are still going strong. And there you have it, 2 old stories which are the essential layers underneath the new story that we're exploring today. Stay tuned for part 2 and what the new story is all about. Did you hear how the two old stories echo each other? In these ways, the need to confront contemporary injustice, some version of the peace of Rome, whether we explicitly call it that or not. The need to do this with some countercultural vision of the peace of love. The need for the peace of love vision to translate into a strategy that can engage an entire community, because communities can do things way beyond what individuals acting alone are capable of. Remember the proverb from Burkina Faso in West Africa, which says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. These are the layers I am drawing on as I now go on to articulate a new vision of the peace of love, which could be our new story moving forward. Although, truth be told, the new story started back in 2021. That was when I, Reverend Anthony, convened the Justice Visioning Task Force and charged them with developing a congregationally based, congregationally approved vision of where West Shore's justice program could be 5 years into the future, together with an effective strategy for implementation. The Justice Visioning Task Force, or JVTF for short, included Amy Dillon Cody, Warren Campbell Gaston, Joan Clark, Syl Knutson, Jeff Modzelewski, Kathy Ross, and Reverend Anthony. Thanks so much to these folks for their leadership. The task force engaged the congregation at large in numerous ways. It hosted a World Cafe to explore ideas, issues, and questions related to social justice at West Shore. JVTF members attended meetings of all of the church councils, committees, and task forces to present concepts and receive feedback regarding social justice work. JVTF members made themselves available for private and personal discussion. Archival and historical materials were reviewed. And on January 23rd, 2022, I preached on this issue explicitly in my sermon entitled, A Vision for Church-Based Justice Work. And I encourage you to take another look. The task force recorded what people said. It noticed repeating concerns and themes and hopes. It acknowledged the creative tensions that lay beneath desires which, on the surface, seemed incompatible. It honored our many accomplishments and witnessed past mistakes and disappointments. From this work of careful listening and discernment, the JVTF completed my charge to it. It fleshed out the congregationally based vision. It shared it with West Shore's Board of Trustees, which affirmed the vision at its October 27, 2022 meeting and added it as an agenda item for the annual meeting to be held on May 21, which is when the congregation will vote on it. In other words, it's not going to be imposed from above. It's got to be owned by all of us as our collective piece of love vision. It's got to sound like us, who we are, what feels good as we envision ourselves in the near future. This proposed collective vision is in your order of service. It's the beautiful pamphlet crafted by Debbie Elliott in the office. Bring it with you to the sermon chat after this service at noon here in the sanctuary, where JVTF member Joan Clark and board member Kathy Kasoriak will hear your feedback, answer any concerns, and listen. Take the pamphlet home and reflect on it. Continue to offer feedback to Reverend Anthony or Joan or Kathy via email or phone or conversation. It's not written in stone. Be on the lookout for the 4 separate town hall meetings to be held in advance of the annual meeting, where further discussion can take place. We'll need to solidify things before the May vote, but feedback up until then is welcome. Right now, though, let me ask you to set the pamphlet aside as I guide you through some of the main things as I see it. In doing this, I'm actually going to follow the Reverend Shuddy's lead with his 1946 statement of the 4 great needs of every human soul. I promise you, this wasn't really on the radar when the JVTF was doing its work in framing the proposed congregational vision, but surprisingly and with wonder, I have only recently sensed a deep harmony between the two. Here's what I mean. Take Reverend Shuddy's first great human need, a feeling of security. The need to face the laws and limits of life and work with them, not against them. One of these laws and limits is about anyone's capacity to bring more of the peace of love to the world. That capacity is not unlimited. Violate that law, transgress that limit, and the result is a compassion fatigue, which is being emotionally overwhelmed to the point of paralysis and numbness. You start out dreaming big justice dreams and acting big justice actions, and you end up disillusioned and struggling even to get out of bed in the morning. Compassion fatigue can happen in all sorts of ways. One way is when you feel burned by the thought of all the things left undone, all the things needing doing. It won't matter if in your justice work you've accomplished 10 impossible things. You will feel guilty. You will feel tormented by that 11th impossible thing that didn't get accomplished. The guilt and torment is debilitating. It'll burn you out. On the scale of a church, what this burnout track looks like is blowing past every justice accomplishment without telling the story, without celebrating the victory, and instead rushing onwards to the next thing and then the next. All the while, what you say to others and what you say about the church in general is that we're not doing enough. It's never enough. Let's do more. Talk about a fast track to people feeling cynical about church, church-wide burnout. So look at this proposed justice vision, the whole thing, as an effort to create some security in our justice work. We can't do everything all at once, but can we agree to focus on at least some things that democratically most of us value? Can we be busy with peace of love work and still save ourselves from burnout? Can we? Yes, I heard it. Now, consider the next of Reverend Shuddy's list of great human needs, a sense of significance. Each person realizing that their unique contribution to West Shore's justice program matters, that everyone is needed. Several of the top priorities of the proposed vision address this need, but the one I will mention here is number 3, increasing opportunities for social justice participation at all levels to all congregants. Part of this is about better communication about what's happening and what service opportunities are available. Another part of this is being more strategic in identifying community actions to which the entire congregation is invited, as opposed to inviting everyone to come to everything, which results in few people going to anything. And then there's this. While honoring the multitude of initiatives already in place, can we develop a process for how the entire congregation might select a broad social justice focus and then collectively implement it? Is there a way we can honor our diverse interests and yet, at the same time, become known in the community as that church in Rocky River that's making a concrete difference in Cleveland about poverty or literacy or environmentalism or something else? Not all of them at once, but one of them, one at a time. Maybe for a long time, maybe just for 3 years or so. And then we decide to focus on another. Beyond this, yet another aspect of the proposed vision which addresses the everyone is important need is the incompleteness of the 5-year implementation plan. When you read in the implementation plan in the brochure, you'll see this. There are some significant gaps in it. It's not because of laziness. It's because none of us are psychics and can see 5 years into the future. Things happen. Things change. Ongoing feedback is needed. Also, the more you live into a strategic plan, the more you learn about what's needed and when. That's why, if this plan is approved by the congregation, the next step will be to recruit a steering team whose job is to help flesh out the practical implementation plan, as well as to monitor achievement, report to the board and myself on an ongoing basis, and report to the congregation annually. This plan needs all of us to make it a success on an ongoing basis. Back to Reverend Shuddy's 4 great human needs. The third is the development of sensitivity to the needs, desires, and worth of others. Only by such development can we hope for a world of peace and plenty for all. One way in which the proposed justice plan seeks to do this is by emphasizing the spiritual growth dimension of justice work. Actions that seek to bring the peace of love to the world, if they are to be part of the solution, need to emerge out of a genuinely sensitive character, what I call justice-heartedness. Specifically, I am talking about personal character, which contains some of the following things. A sense of agency, that no matter how bad things seem, there is still hope. An ability to show up and do one's part and then let go of the results. A capacity to work from a place of love and not from resentment. an ability to make peace with the world's imperfection and one's own imperfection. Living a life that balances saving the world with savoring the world. Growing awareness of unconscious biases that unwittingly create suffering in oneself and others, which the 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism names explicitly. The proposed plan includes the idea of creating a program of one-on-one group spiritual counseling to support people's growth in this direction. The resulting growth towards fuller justice-heartedness, in turn, supports justice actions which heal with minimal side effects of harm. Finally, the last of Reverend Schuttes' 4 great human needs, the need to add another dimension to life if life is to reach its highest fulfillment. You may be wondering about what exactly Reverend Schutte is referring to. Here's my thought. He's talking about the added dimension of accountability. Accountability, which is really a spiritual sensitivity to how any individual's well-being is wrapped up in the well-being of the whole. To how my well-being and your well-being involves responsibility and responsiveness to the ethical and religious values we hold in common. None of us gets a pass. None of us gets to slack off. Each of us has to do our part to help the common good. The proposed justice vision seeks to underscore this dimension of accountability in several ways. One is for our justice task forces to set annual goals for themselves, work to achieve them, and then assess achievement at the end of the program year. Another is for us to go to the next level in our 8th principle institutional transformation work, so that we are providing meaningful and life-changing resources to people who want to do their part in healing the evils of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and more. Yet, a third aspect to accountability is probably the broadest one possible. It's simply this: for we as a congregation to take another look at the statement in our congregational mission. Currently, the statement is to inspire more people to live lives of meaning and purpose. Don't get me wrong, it's lovely. But the proposed justice vision would have us wonder, does this get to the heart of our basic reason for existing as a congregation now? The JVTF was sensitive to quite a few comments from you all that the mission says nothing about justice work. Justice is not in there explicitly. I think it is in there implicitly. But is it time to make it more explicit? Is it time to say, with greater forcefulness, we exist to rally people of liberal faith, to act in service to greater love and justice?
Sounds good, brother.
The peace of love is ancient and will always be there between the lines. Reverend Schutte's 1946 vision will always be between the lines of who we are. But new times require new expression and new direction for the sake of relevance. Even if the proposed justice vision does not garner enough votes at the May 21st annual meeting, still the need remains. What are West Shore's collective justice goals? Where are we going? Where are we headed? Can we do this collectively so that we can go together and therefore go far? Let's do this. I believe we can. Can we give Reverend Anthony an amen? Amen. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace seeking justice. I mean go in peace committed to all equal rights and equal opportunities for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace.
Amen.